When the sky burns, the atmosphere screamed as the silencer plummeted. Captain Jace Morgan wrestled the controls, his jaw set in grim determination. The ship's once sleek exterior was a mess of scorched plating, and every alarm on the panel blared like a death knell. Critical systems failing, Sigma, his snarky AI co-pilot, announced flatly. May I suggest not dying? It's bad for morale. Jace shot a glare at the holographic orb that represented Sigma. Helpful as ever, Sigma. Engage the stabilizers. Already fried. I'd say brace for impact, but we're well past polite advice. The ground rushed up to meet them, a kaleidoscope of iridescent greens and blues. The crash wasn't just loud. It was primal. The ship carved a fiery wound into the alien jungle, throwing dirt and glowing vegetation into the air. Jace's world spun, his head slammed against the seat, and everything went black. When he came to, smoke curled lazily through shattered panels, and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry stung his nostrils. Groaning, he pushed himself upright and surveyed the ruined cockpit. Sigma, he croaked. Still functional, Captain. Unlike your ship, the AI quipped from his handheld communicator. Would you like a damage report or a eulogy? Jace grimaced, unbuckling his harness. Neither. Just help me figure out where the hell we are. A world that watches. The jungle outside was alive with light. Leaves shimmered like polished opals, and the ground seemed to pulse faintly beneath his boots. Strange, whispery sounds drifted from the foliage, soft and deliberate, like the world itself was breathing. Jace retrieved his pack from the wreckage, ensuring his essentials were intact: a plasma cutter, emergency rations, and his trusty laser pistol. He didn't trust this alien beauty. It was too aware. Sigma, analyze the atmosphere, Jace muttered, holding up the communicator. Breathable, slightly higher oxygen concentration. But Captain, I'm detecting movement. Multiple entities, closing fast. Jace froze, his hand instinctively going to his pistol. The jungle's whispers grew louder, becoming a rhythmic rustle. Eyes, dozens of them, glimmered in the shadows. From the foliage emerged creatures that seemed sculpted from the jungle itself. Humanoid but lean and wiry, their skin a chameleon-like blend of greens and golds. They moved with predatory grace, their amber eyes fixed on Jace. Locals, Jace murmured, keeping his weapon low but ready. The largest of the group stepped forward. Its face was angular, almost feline, with an air of regal authority. It spoke, a guttural language that Jace's translator struggled to process. Friendly, are you? He asked, not expecting an answer. The creature tilted its head, then barked something that made the others tense. One leaped forward, brandishing a spear tipped with something that glowed faintly. Jace raised his pistol in reflex. Captain, Sigma warned, I advise against escalating. The tension was shattered by a sharp, resonant tone. A voice, clear and commanding, rang out. Stop. The figure who emerged next was unlike the others. Her form was humanoid but with skin that shimmered like molten silver. Her eyes, a piercing violet, locked onto Jace with unsettling intensity. You, she said, her tone edged with both curiosity and accusation, should not be here. First contact. Jace lowered his weapon but didn't holster it. Not exactly by choice, he replied, gesturing to the smoking wreckage behind him. Crash landing wasn't on my itinerary. The woman studied him, her gaze cold and calculating. This world does not welcome outsiders. Why have you come? Jace spread his hands in mock innocence. Ship malfunction. I'm just trying to survive. She stepped closer, her movements fluid and deliberate, like water flowing through rock. The other creatures backed away, as if she carried an unseen authority. You will not survive long without guidance, she said flatly. Jace raised an eyebrow. Guidance from you? Yes, she replied, and for the first time, her voice softened. The jungle watches. It does not forgive trespassers. Convenient, Jace muttered. And who are you? I am Alera, she said, her violet eyes narrowing. Guardian of this world. If you wish to leave it alive, you will follow my lead. Jace hesitated. Alera exuded power, but trust wasn't something he gave easily, especially not on an alien planet. But as the jungle's whispers grew louder, and the other creatures melted back into the shadows, he realized he didn't have much choice. Fine, he said, slinging his pack over his shoulder. Lead the way, Guardian. As they moved deeper into the shimmering jungle, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that the jungle wasn't just alive. It was aware, watching, waiting. Captain, Sigma chimed in his ear, I calculate a 76% chance this decision leads to disaster. Jace smirked. Then it's the right call. Behind him, the crash site was already being reclaimed by the jungle, the wreckage disappearing beneath a carpet of glowing vines. Whatever lay ahead, Jace knew one thing for sure. He was in over his head. The jungle whispers. Jace followed Alera deeper into the jungle, his boots crunching on soil that seemed to pulse with life. The canopy above shimmered with bioluminescent leaves that cast ghostly patterns on the forest floor. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, chittering, growls, and something that sounded eerily like laughter. This place gets creepier by the second, Jace muttered, gripping his laser pistol tightly. Alera glanced back, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The jungle is alive, human. It sees you. It judges you. Jace raised an eyebrow. Judges me? What's it gonna do? Send me to plant court? Her lips twitched, but the smirk didn't last. Mock it all you want, but the jungle doesn't tolerate disrespect. It has claimed many before you. Claimed them how? You'll see if you're not careful. The first warning. The path they followed was narrow, bordered by plants that shimmered when Alera moved near them, but seemed to recoil from Jace. He noticed it almost immediately. Is it just me, or does your jungle hate me? Alera paused, her gaze unreadable. It's wary of you. Humans bring destruction, greed, and chaos. Hey, Jace said, raising his hands defensively. I'm just trying to survive here. My ship crashed, remember? And yet, Alera said, her voice cold, survival often turns to conquest with your kind. Before Jace could respond, a low growl rumbled through the underbrush. He froze, his pistol snapping to aim at the sound. What now? Do not fire, Alera hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. The growling grew louder, joined by a rustling that seemed to come from all directions. Slowly, a creature emerged, a massive quadruped with sleek, obsidian-like fur that shimmered in the light. Its eyes were a deep blood red, and its claws gouged the ground as it stalked toward them. A sentinel beast, Alera murmured, her tone reverent but tense. It protects the jungle. From what? Jace asked, his finger hovering over the trigger. From intruders, like you. A tense standoff. The beast stopped a few meters away, its gaze locked on Jace. It sniffed the air, baring teeth that glinted like polished ivory. Stay still, Alera commanded. That thing looks like it eats people for fun, Jace shot back. If you move, it will. Jace's heart pounded as the beast stepped closer, its breath visible in the cool air. He tightened his grip on the pistol, every instinct screaming at him to fire. But then, Alera raised her hand. A faint glow emanated from her palm, and the beast's growl softened. Its ears twitched, and it took a cautious step back, then another. Within moments, it disappeared into the shadows as if it had never been there. What the hell was that? Jace demanded, his voice shaking. Respect, Alera said simply, lowering her hand. For you, maybe, Jace muttered. It looked like it wanted me for lunch. Because it doesn't trust you, she replied, starting to walk again. But the jungle listens to me. For now, that might keep you alive. Secrets of the jungle. As they continued, Jace couldn't shake the unease that settled in his chest. You keep talking about the jungle like it's some kind of sentient thing. What's really going on here? It is sentient, Alira said, her tone matter-of-fact. The jungle is connected to the heart. The heart. She stopped and pointed to the horizon. Through the dense trees, Jace could make out a faint glow in the distance, a steady, rhythmic pulse of light. It's the source of life for this world, Alira explained. It keeps everything in balance. Plants, animals, even me. We're all tied to it. Jace frowned. And what happens if something happens to it? The jungle dies, she said simply. And so do I. Her words hung heavy in the air. Jace felt a pang of guilt, though he wasn't sure why. So, what's your deal? Are you some kind of protector? Yes, Alira said, continuing forward. I was born to guard the heart and ensure its power is not abused. Jace smirked. And here I thought I was the unlucky one. An ominous discovery. The jungle opened into a small clearing, and Jace immediately noticed something out of place. A jagged metallic structure jutted from the ground, its edges sharp and unnatural against the organic beauty around it. What's that? He asked, stepping closer. Alira's expression darkened. A scar. As they approached, Jace could see that the structure wasn't just metal. It was a piece of a ship, though not his own. It bore strange markings, and the air around it felt wrong. This isn't human tech, Jace said, examining the debris. No, Alira agreed, her voice tense. It belongs to the scavengers. Scavengers. They've come before, she said, her violet eyes narrowing. They seek the heart's power. They will stop at nothing to take it. Jace's stomach churned. And what happens if they succeed? The heart's energy is not meant to be harnessed. If they take it, this world, and everything on it, will collapse. Great, Jace muttered. So now I've got to worry about alien pirates on top of killer plants and giant murder cats. You wanted to survive, Alira said, a faint smirk playing on her lips. This is your chance. Jace sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Why do I get the feeling this is going to get worse before it gets better? Alira's gaze was steady, almost pitying. Because it will. A new threat. As they left the clearing, Jace couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The jungle's whispers had changed, becoming more urgent, almost warning. Something's wrong, he said, his voice low. Alira nodded, her steps quickening. We need to move. Now. The shadows around them deepened, and the faint hum of machinery reached Jace's ears. He tightened his grip on his pistol, his adrenaline spiking. Scavengers. Yes, Alira said, her tone grim. And they're closer than I thought. Jace swallowed hard. The jungle had been terrifying enough. But now he had to face an enemy that might be even deadlier. Welcome to survival, he muttered under his breath, following Alira into the unknown. Shadows in the canopy. The jungle was no longer just a living entity. It was a battlefield waiting to erupt. Jace trailed behind Alira, his eyes scanning every shadow, every shifting leaf. The faint hum of machinery echoed through the dense foliage, a sound too cold and mechanical for a world so vibrantly alive. How many of these scavengers are we talking about? Jace whispered, gripping his pistol tightly. Enough to pose a threat, Alira replied without looking back. Her voice was calm, but her shoulders were tense. They always come in squads, and they're well armed. Fantastic, Jace muttered, trying to ignore the growing unease curling in his gut. The enemy revealed. The hum grew louder as they approached a small ridge overlooking a clearing. Alira signaled for Jace to stop, crouching low. He followed her lead, peering over the edge. Below, a group of scavengers had set up a temporary encampment. Their dark, segmented armor glinted under the faint bioluminescent light of the jungle, and their movements were precise and coordinated. They carried weapons that pulsed with a sickly green energy, crackling faintly as they adjusted their positions. "Great," Jace muttered. "They got toys. And here I am with a glorified flashlight." Elira glanced at him, her violet eyes narrowing. "Do not underestimate them. They've killed Guardians before." Jace arched a brow. "I thought you said you were a big deal around here." "I am," she said, her voice cold. "But even I have limits." A plan of action. Jace studied the camp, his mind racing. The scavengers had erected some kind of device in the center of the clearing, a spire-like structure humming with energy. Its purpose was unclear, but the ominous glow it emitted made Jace uneasy. "What's that thing?" he asked, nodding toward the device. "A siphon," Elira replied, her jaw tight. "It draws energy from the heart. If they activate it, the jungle will suffer, possibly die." "Right," Jace said, rubbing his temples. "So, we stop them. Any ideas?" "I'll distract them," Elira said firmly. "You disable the siphon." Jace blinked. "I'm sorry. What? You want me to go up against those guys while you do? What exactly?" "They won't focus on you if I'm in their way," she said simply. "And you're resourceful. Figure it out." "Oh, sure," Jace muttered. "Just stroll into a hostile camp and mess with alien tech. Easy." Elira's gaze softened slightly. "You'll have to trust me, Jace. The jungle chose not to destroy you. Perhaps it sees something in you that even you don't." Jace snorted. "Let's hope the jungle's a better judge of character than I am." The mission begins. As Elira disappeared into the shadows, Jace took a deep breath. His heart pounded as he made his way down the ridge, keeping low and sticking to the underbrush. The scavengers moved with a predator's grace, their weapons always within reach. From the corner of his eye, Jace saw a faint shimmer, a sign that Elira had made her move. Moments later, a brilliant flash of light erupted in the distance, followed by the unmistakable hum of energy discharges. "Showtime," Jace muttered, slipping closer to the siphon. A dangerous puzzle. Up close, the siphon was even more intimidating. The spire pulsed rhythmically, its energy tendrils digging into the ground like roots. Jace examined the control panel, his stomach sinking as he realized he couldn't make heads or tails of the alien symbols. "Sigma," he hissed, tapping his communicator. "You getting this?" The AI's voice crackled in his ear. "Analyzing. This tech is fascinating and deadly. You have about 3 minutes before it fully activates." "Great. Any chance you can walk me through disabling it?" "I can try," Sigma said. "But if you cut the wrong connection, you might accelerate the process." "Perfect," Jace muttered. "Let's gamble." A close call. As he worked, sweat dripped down his face. The scavengers were distracted, but it wouldn't last long. Elira's light show was drawing them away, but the longer she held their attention, the greater the risk. "Jace," Sigma warned, "I'm detecting movement. They're returning to the siphon." Jace cursed under his breath, his hands working faster. He yanked a glowing conduit free, and the spire shuddered violently. The glow dimmed slightly, but the device was still active. "That didn't do it," he muttered. 2 minutes, Sigma said. "Try the central node." Before Jace could react, a shadow fell over him. He looked up to see a scavenger towering above him, its weapon trained on his chest. "Ahai," Jace said weakly. Elira's intervention. The scavenger raised its weapon, but before it could fire, a blur of silver and violet slammed into it. Elira moved like a storm, her strikes precise and devastating. The scavenger crumpled to the ground, its weapon skidding away. "I thought you were distracting them," Jace said, scrambling to his feet. "I was," Elira snapped, her breath heavy. "But you were taking too long." "Good timing, though," Jace said, grinning despite himself. "Focus," Elira said, nodding toward the siphon. With her covering him, Jace returned to the device. Sigma guided him through the final steps, and with a sharp tug, he disconnected the main power source. The siphon let out a high-pitched whine before powering down completely. A narrow escape. The jungle seemed to sigh in relief as the siphon went dark. Alira grabbed Jace's arm, pulling him away just as the remaining scavengers regrouped. "Time to go," she said, her voice urgent. They sprinted back into the jungle, the scavengers hot on their heels. Energy blasts zipped past them, illuminating the dark foliage. As they ran, Jace couldn't help but laugh breathlessly. "This is what you call survival. Welcome to my world." Alira shot back, a rare smirk on her lips. For the first time since the crash, Jace felt something other than fear. He felt alive. The jungle fights back. Jace's lungs burned as he tore through the underbrush, ducking low-hanging branches and leaping over gnarled roots that jutted from the jungle floor. Behind him, the scavengers were relentless, their sickly green energy blasts lighting up the darkness. "Are we running in circles?" he shouted, barely dodging another blast. "No," Alira replied sharply, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We're leading them somewhere. Somewhere better, be safer than here." Alira's lips twitched into a humorless smirk. "It's not about safety, human. It's about strategy." Jace's heart sank. I hate that word. A sudden standstill. The scavengers stopped firing suddenly, their footsteps slowing. Jace glanced over his shoulder and nearly stumbled. "What are they doing?" "They've realized the jungle isn't theirs to command," Alira said. Her voice was calm, but there was a glint of something dangerous in her violet eyes. The jungle had grown unnervingly quiet. The scavengers, so methodical and calculated moments ago, now looked uneasy. One of them barked a command, their distorted voice carrying a hint of fear. Jace felt the air shift. It was subtle at first, like a distant vibration beneath his feet. Then it grew, a rhythmic pulse that made the leaves tremble and the ground seem alive. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alira turned to him, her gaze intense. "The jungle has decided to intervene. Nature's fury." The ground beneath the scavengers erupted. Massive vines, thick as tree trunks, shot upward, twisting and writhing like living serpents. One scavenger was snatched mid-step, their weapon clattering to the ground as the vine hurled them into the canopy. Another tried to fire their weapon, but the glowing energy bolt ricocheted harmlessly off a shimmering barrier of bioluminescent leaves. The jungle itself seemed to shift and close in, creating a labyrinth that disoriented the remaining scavengers. Jace could only stare, his pistol limp in his hand. "You've got to be kidding me." "The heart's energy flows through everything here," Alira said, her voice reverent, "and it doesn't take kindly to intruders." Caught in the chaos, the scavengers were panicking now, firing wildly at the encroaching jungle. One of them screamed as a swarm of glowing, insect-like creatures descended, their wings buzzing like a hive of angry engines. Jace felt a pang of pity, but quickly shook it off. These scavengers had come to strip the planet of its life. There was no room for sympathy. "What about us?" he asked, gripping Alira's arm. "We're intruders too, remember." Alira didn't answer immediately. She closed her eyes, her breathing steady. The faint glow of her silver skin intensified, and the jungle seemed to pause, as if listening. "We're not their target," she said finally, "but don't test their patience. Stay close to me." "That's comforting," Jace muttered, sticking to her side as they moved carefully through the chaos. A desperate escape. The scavengers were losing ground fast, their precision and tactics useless against a foe they couldn't understand. One of them managed to break free, sprinting in Jace and Alira's direction. "We got company," Jace said, raising his pistol. Before he could fire, Alira stepped forward, her hand raised. The scavenger froze mid-step, their body locked in place as if held by invisible chains. "Leave," Alira commanded, her voice resonating with unnatural power, "or the jungle will finish what it started." The scavenger's helmeted head turned toward the writhing vines behind them. Without another word, they bolted back into the labyrinth, their screams echoing as the jungle closed in once more. Jace lowered his pistol, staring at Alara. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." Her expression softened slightly, but there was no humor in her tone. "We're not safe yet." An unsettling revelation. As they continued deeper into the jungle, the atmosphere shifted again. The oppressive hum of the scavenger's weapons was gone, replaced by the low, steady pulse of the heart. "Why did the jungle let me live?" Jace asked after a long silence. Alara hesitated, her gaze distant. "The heart doesn't judge lightly. It saw something in you, a spark, perhaps. But that doesn't mean it trusts you." "Great," Jace said, rubbing the back of his neck. "A spark, that's vague." Alara stopped abruptly, her head tilting slightly. "Do you hear that?" Jace strained his ears. The jungle was still, but there was something faint, like a whisper carried on the wind. "What is it?" "A warning," Alara said, her voice grim. "We're not alone." A new threat emerges. Before Jace could react, a figure stepped from the shadows. Unlike the scavengers, this one moved with an eerie grace. Their armor was sleek and black, reflecting no light, and their helmet bore a single glowing red visor. "Friend of yours?" Jace asked, raising his pistol. "No," Alara said, her voice barely audible. "This one is worse." The figure spoke, their voice smooth and mechanical. "You've been interfering, Guardian. That won't do." Jace aimed his pistol. "And who exactly are you?" The figure tilted their head slightly. "I am a harbinger, and you, human, are irrelevant." Jace tightened his grip on the pistol, his heart pounding. "Yeah, I've been called worse." Alara stepped forward, her glow intensifying. "This is your only warning. Leave this world." The harbinger laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You misunderstand, Guardian. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to end this." The fight begins. Without warning, the harbinger raised their hand, and a wave of energy erupted from their palm. Alara reacted instantly, raising the shimmering barrier that absorbed the impact. "Jace, run," she shouted. "Not a chance," he shot back, firing at the harbinger. The energy bolt hit their armor and dissipated harmlessly. "Cute," the harbinger said, raising their weapon. The jungle erupted again, vines lashing out at the harbinger, but they moved with inhuman speed, slicing through the vegetation with a blade of crackling energy. Jace gritted his teeth. "Got any bright ideas, Alara?" "Survive," she said, her voice strained as she held the barrier against another blast. Jace smirked despite the chaos. "Yeah, I figured that part out already." As the harbinger advanced, the jungle seemed to rally, its glowing energy intensifying. Jace knew one thing for sure: this fight was far from over. The heart's secrets. The air grew heavy as Jace and Alara pressed deeper into the jungle, its luminous glow casting long shadows that danced like living entities. The rhythmic pulse of the heart was louder now, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the ground and into their bones. Jace tightened his grip on his pistol, glancing nervously at Alara. "This heart of yours, it's not going to sprout legs and start fighting, is it?" Alara shot him a sidelong glance, her expression unreadable. "The heart doesn't fight. It protects, and it chooses who is worthy." "That's not ominous at all," Jace muttered, stepping over a root that seemed to shift slightly as he passed. The jungle grew denser, the bioluminescent trees arching overhead to form a natural cathedral. At the center of the clearing ahead, a massive, ancient tree stood, its bark shimmering with a shifting spectrum of light. Suspended in its branches was a glowing orb, pulsing with an energy that seemed to breathe. Jace stopped short, staring. "That's it. That's the heart." Alara nodded, her tone reverent. "The source of life for this entire world." A test of worth. Jace approached cautiously, every instinct screaming at him to keep his distance. The air around the heart was thick, charged with a static energy that made his skin tingle. "Don't touch it," Alira warned, her voice sharp. "Wasn't planning on it," Jace replied, though his curiosity burned. "So, what now?" "We just stare at it. The heart will decide," Alira said, stepping forward. The glowing orb pulsed brighter, and Jace felt a strange pull, like it was reaching out to him. His mind filled with a cascade of images, worlds he'd never seen, creatures that defied imagination, and an overwhelming sense of connection. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice trembling. "The heart is searching your intentions," Alira said, her gaze fixed on the orb. "It's deciding if you are an ally or a threat." "No pressure," Jace muttered, resisting the urge to take a step back. A sudden invasion. The serene moment shattered as a deafening crack echoed through the clearing. Jace spun around, his pistol raised, just in time to see the Harbinger emerge from the shadows. "I told you this would end," the Harbinger said, their voice calm and mocking. Alira moved instantly, placing herself between the heart and the intruder. Her glow intensified, and the jungle responded, vines and roots rising to form a barrier around them. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice cold and commanding. "And neither does he," the Harbinger replied, pointing toward Jace. "Humans are destroyers by nature. You're making a mistake trusting one." "Yeah, well, you're not exactly winning any popularity contests yourself," Jace shot back, his pistol trained on the Harbinger. A battle of power. The Harbinger raised their arm, unleashing a torrent of energy that slammed into the barrier Alira had created. The vines shuddered under the assault but held firm. Alira stepped forward, her hands glowing with a silver light that seemed to ripple through the air. "Jace, get to the heart," she shouted. "What? And do what?" "Just go." Jace hesitated for a fraction of a second before sprinting toward the heart. The energy around it grew more intense as he approached, and he could feel its pull, as though it was inviting him closer. Behind him, the Harbinger and Alira clashed in a dazzling display of light and power. The jungle roared in response, its vines lashing out like serpents, and its bioluminescent leaves glowing brighter with each pulse of the heart. The heart's call. As Jace reached the heart, he felt a surge of energy course through him. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, filling every nerve with a sense of purpose and clarity. The images in his mind returned, but this time they were focused. He saw the scavengers, their siphons draining the life from countless worlds. He saw Alira standing alone against wave after wave of intruders. And he saw himself, not as a pilot, but as a part of something much larger. "All right," he whispered. "What do you want me to do?" The heart pulsed, and Jace felt a connection form. It was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, a merging of thought and intent. His hand moved instinctively, reaching for the glowing orb. "Jace," Alira's voice cut through the chaos, filled with urgency. "Don't." Before she could finish, his fingers brushed the surface of the heart. The heart unleashed. The clearing erupted in a blinding light, and Jace felt himself lifted off the ground. Energy poured into him, filling him with both power and understanding. The jungle's pulse cinched with his heartbeat, and he realized he wasn't just touching the heart. He was a part of it. The Harbinger staggered back, shielding their visor from the brilliant glow. "What is this?" they hissed. Alira stared in shock, her glow dimming slightly as she took in the sight. The heart. It chose him. Jace opened his eyes, now glowing with the same light as the heart. He raised his hand, and the jungle responded, vines and roots surging forward to entangle the Harbinger. "This ends now," Jace said, his voice resonating with a power that wasn't entirely his own. The Harbinger struggled, their energy blades slicing through the vines, but the jungle was relentless. The vines tightened, dragging the intruder toward the ground. "You think this changes anything?" The Harbinger snarled. "There will be more." There are always more. Then we'll be ready, Jace said, his gaze unwavering. A fragile alliance. As the light faded and the Harbinger was consumed by the jungle, Jace lowered his hand, the glow in his eyes dimming. He stumbled, suddenly feeling the weight of his own body again. Alara caught him before he fell, her expression a mix of awe and caution. "You touched the heart," she said softly. "Yeah," Jace replied, his voice hoarse, "and I think it touched me back." The jungle around them grew quiet once more, the pulse of the heart steady and calm. Alara helped Jace to his feet, her grip firm but gentle. "You've been marked," she said, her tone unreadable. "The heart chose you for a reason." Jace chuckled weakly. "Great. No pressure, right?" Alira's lips twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. No pressure at all. But as they turned to leave the clearing, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that his connection to the heart had only just begun, and that the fight for this world was far from over. The mark of the heart. The jungle was unnervingly quiet as Jace and Alira moved away from the heart's clearing. The glowing vines and trees pulsed faintly, as though catching their breath after the battle. Jace could still feel the energy of the heart thrumming inside him, faint but unmistakable, like an ember smoldering beneath his skin. "What did it do to me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alira's gaze was sharp but unreadable. "The heart doesn't give power lightly. Whatever it has given you, it will expect you to use it." "Use it for what?" Jace shot back, his frustration bubbling over. "I didn't ask for this." "No one asks," Alira said, her tone firm but not unkind. "But the heart sees something in you, something I don't yet understand." Jace rubbed the back of his neck, the faint glow of his eyes dimming as he wrestled with his thoughts. "Well, let's hope it knows what it's doing. Because I sure don't." A rising threat. The jungle stirred again, its whispers growing urgent. Alira stopped abruptly, her head tilting as if listening to a voice Jace couldn't hear. "What now?" he asked, already gripping his pistol. "They're regrouping," Alira said, her violet eyes narrowing. "The scavengers won't retreat after losing the siphon. And the Harbinger was only the beginning." Jace groaned. Of course it was. Why can't they just give up and go home? "Because their home is gone," Alira said quietly. "Their kind destroys everything they touch. Now they seek to take from others what they've lost." Jace's sarcasm faltered. "And this world is next on their list." Alira nodded. "Unless we stop them." A call to arms. As they pushed deeper into the jungle, Jace noticed a change in the environment. The plants seemed more alive, their glow brighter, their movements deliberate. "The jungle's waking up," he said, half to himself. "It's preparing," Alira replied. "For what?" "For war." Jace stopped, his brow furrowing. "War. Against scavengers. They've got advanced tech, weapons, armies. What's the jungle got? Vines and glowing bugs." Alira turned to him, her expression fierce. "The jungle is more powerful than you understand. It doesn't need armies. It needs purpose. And now, it has you." Jace swallowed hard. No pressure, right? The scavenger armada. They reached the edge of a massive ravine, the jungle falling away to reveal a wide open plain. Beyond it, a fleet of scavenger ships had landed, their dark, angular forms standing stark against the alien landscape. Jace's stomach dropped as he counted at least a dozen vessels, each bristling with weaponry. "They're mobilizing," Alira said, her voice low. Jace stared at the scene, his hands clenched into fists. "How are we supposed to stop that?" "With the heart," Alira said simply. He turned to her, incredulous. "The heart? What do you expect me to do? Wave my hand and make them disappear?" Alira's gaze was steady. "You don't understand your connection to it yet, but you will. The heart's power flows through you now. Jace, use it. A new ally." Before Jace could argue, the ground beneath them rumbled. From the jungle emerged a massive reptilian creature with shimmering scales and eyes like molten gold. It stood at least 20 feet tall, its presence commanding and awe-inspiring. Jace took an involuntary step back. "What is that?" "The Sentinel," Alira said, her tone reverent. "A guardian of the heart, awakened by your touch." The creature lowered its massive head, its golden eyes locking onto Jace. For a moment, he felt a strange connection, like it was studying him, judging him. "Ahai," Jace said nervously. "Nice. Lizard." The Sentinel let out a low, rumbling growl that shook the ground. "It's here to help," Alira said, "if you're worthy." "Fantastic," Jace muttered. "No pressure. The heart's power." As the scavengers began to mobilize their forces, Jace felt the pull of the heart again. It was faint but insistent, urging him forward. He closed his eyes, focusing on the ember inside him, and the world seemed to shift. The jungle around him responded, its energy converging on the Sentinel. The massive creature roared, its scales glowing brighter as the heart's power coursed through it. Alira watched in awe. "You're channeling it." "Yeah. Well, I hope it knows what it's doing," Jace said through gritted teeth. The Sentinel surged forward, its massive form crashing through the scavenger lines. The ground quaked with each step, and the jungle itself joined the assault, vines snapping like whips and swarms of glowing insects descending on the enemy. A turning point. Jace and Alira moved with purpose, weaving through the chaos as the jungle waged its war. The scavengers fought back with their advanced weapons, but their precision was no match for the unpredictability of the living jungle. One of the scavengers spotted Jace and raised their weapon. Before they could fire, the Sentinel intercepted, its massive tail smashing the soldier into the ground. "Remind me to never get on that thing's bad side," Jace said, breathing heavily. Alira smiled faintly. "It fights for you now." "Great," Jace replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Let's hope it doesn't change its mind." A grim victory. As the battle raged on, the scavengers began to falter. Their ranks thinned, their ships damaged by the jungle's relentless assault. The remaining soldiers retreated toward their vessels, scrambling to escape. The Sentinel roared one final time, and the jungle fell still. The surviving scavengers fled, their ships rising into the sky and disappearing into the atmosphere. Jace collapsed onto the ground, his chest heaving. "Did we win?" "For now," Alira said, her gaze fixed on the retreating ships. "But they'll be back, and they'll bring more." Jace sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Of course they will, because nothing's ever easy." Alira knelt beside him, her violet eyes softening. "You fought well, Jace. The heart chose wisely." He laughed weakly. "Yeah, well, let's hope it's not done helping, because I have a feeling this is just the beginning." As the jungle began to quiet, the faint pulse of the heart resonated in the distance, a reminder that the fight was far from over.